Welcome to Equality Insights, which is a podcast around culture, diversity, and inclusion. This podcast brings to you science, research, and very clever opinions from Sasha Graham, CEO of Equality Group, and
Professor Keon West, Head of Academic Research at Equality Group. We're bringing you the most relaxed discussion on the most awkward topics, because we know this stuff can be miserable. It doesn't mean you have to be.
Keon. Let's talk about cognitive diversity.
Yes.
This is something our clients talk about, and effectively, I think in a lot of conversations and a lot of perceptions, the idea is that cognitive diversity is the pinnacle, right? This is what all we should be striving for, right? That's really the fundamental reason why we have diversity, equality, and inclusion, is to make sure that we have a group of different people from different backgrounds, but most of all, those who think differently, those who bring cognitive diversity. And the question lies, then why do we need to account for a variety of demographic characteristics? I mean, you can literally have a group of, white men who would be quite cognitively diverse, right? And you can capture that on a variety of different metrics, and they can have very different experiences. They can be different nationalities. They can speak different languages. So why then people like us come and say, well, hang on a minute, you're not diverse?
Yeah, in fact, I could see that they could say, arguably, you could have more diverse people in a room of all white men, but where one's an introvert, one's an extrovert, one's high on this, one's low on that, instead of having like a black guy who's exactly the same as everyone else, in terms of cognition, or a woman who's exactly the same as everyone else. So you want that diversity. So, we're not talking about the true diversity. That's the problem.
Yeah, the real diversity.
Yeah. So this is what we're trying to get at, the underlying cognitive stuff. So we've heard this many times, right? We've gone into a lot of different meeting rooms, and we've had many versions of this in terms of, well, the benefit is a cognitive, that's what we're trying to get. Or we might not be very diverse in the terms you're measuring, but we're extremely cognitively diverse. The kind of, well, I don't really care about that kind of diversity. I think it's important to do cognitive diversity instead. Or can we also add cognitive diversity? So there's a lot of different versions. I'm going to stop being the polite one. And I want to call some serious bullshit about cognitive diversity. I mean, like serious, there's multiple levels of bullshit that I do want to call out. And I want to be scientific in calling out the bullshit that it is, because there is science that says this is bullshit. And not all of it, like I don't want to say all of it's bullshit, but some of it is. And I think it's important to highlight the parts that are bullshit.
Yeah, I can sense the scientific passion that comes.
There's a lot of passion. I love the when something is wrong. When something can be proven wrong and people just don't know, I think that's important. I think you can just tell people, and it's huge.
Okay, well, let's talk about that, because let me play devil's advocate and be like, no, Keon. Okay, well, try to convince me. Still, like,
Okay.
I want people, right? I'm running a business. I want to make best decisions. So what I'm interested in, people giving me different opinions, and they're having confidence to express themselves, also, build on their rich experience.
Yeah, so I'm going to say that part, that sentence, that isn't bullshit. Like that part, I can completely get behind, that having cognitive diversity, having people bring different things can be useful. Absolutely. So a lot of people write about that. Like Matthew Syed has an interesting book where he talks about that. I think it's really nice. I don't have a problem with that. So what you said there, I'm not going to call bullshit on. But what I would say is, which is something people say that's very similar, which is that the only benefit of demographic diversity is that it brings cognitive diversity, that there's no other benefits to it. And I would say that's bullshit. And we know that's bullshit. And we've known that for a really long time. So demographic diversity has its own benefit because we know that there's a lot of bias based on demographic features. So, it's all those studies that we talk about. If you have 1,000 CVs, 500 of them have male names on them, 500 of them have women's names on them, and you compare them. and you send them out, they're exactly the same CV. You send them out to everybody, and you ask them, are these people competent and hireable? Then the men will be rated as more competent and hireable than the women. And this happens every time. And if you have, 100 or 1,000 white CVs and 1,000 black CVs, but they're otherwise completely identical, so white people, black people, then they rate the white people as more competent. So what this means is that DEI work, or this inclusion work, this equalizing work that we're doing, isn't just about cognitive diversity. It's also because there's lots of competent women and ethnic minorities out there who are not being recognized. And that part of the work
Yeah.
has to be to recognize them. Like, forget your cognitive diversity, even if it has no effect at all, even if cognitive diversity isn't increased one jot with DEI work, there are other benefits. And so the pretense that that's the whole diversity we're trying to get at is nonsense. And we need to stop saying that.
Yeah. But, and I think again, maybe just to summarize, effectively, when you are making hiring decisions, when you're making promotion decisions, where you support and promote people from the minority groups within those contexts, you're literally changing the makeup of society, right?
Yeah.
You're literally changing how our society functions. It's about debunking stereotypes and changing perceptions in the wider community.
Yeah.
Like if we look historically, 100 years ago, having a woman as a doctor, I mean, it's whimsical,
Yeah.
right? Because how do you
And it's
do
not
that?
because women
Women
weren't
don't have the
able to be
brains for
doctors.
it. Hmm?
Yeah, and it wasn't because women weren't able to be doctors 100 years ago. Not at all. No.
Well, I mean, exactly. But even though that's what, the scientists in air quotes believed. And the same, right? Like if you look in the US, a lot of this segregation laws, it was also air quotes scientifically proven, right? That's why we've had to keep people different, separate, et cetera, et cetera. But we know those things are not true and we are evolving, and these things they make a difference.
Yeah.
I
They
think
make
people
you
forget that unless we are intentional about it, unless we proactively do this, it will happen. Because I think a lot of people in the West believe that, we're just organically developed like this. Well, of course, there's naturally more women, in various different professions, but it's not. It's because people campaigned and advocated for it.
yeah, and fought for it and suffered for it and
Yeah.
were sometimes like trampled by horses for it or had garbage thrown at them for it. That it wasn't peaceful all the time. So yes, I think the idea that the only benefit of doing DEI work, of increasing demographic diversity, the idea that the only benefit is increasing cognitive diversity, even if we're just looking at a financial or a business success point, is nonsense. And we've known that that's nonsense because we don't we don't need to do that. And I think this brings up other research that has looked at the effects of diversity. And this research looks at diversity directly. It doesn't look at it only as it affects cognitive diversity, but just looks at demographic diversity. And yes, the effect sizes aren't huge. We're not going to say they're huge, but they're there. And we know that demographic diversity has its effects and that these aren't entirely bound up in the cognitive diversity argument. So for me at least, we're too far. We know too much now to pretend that the only possible benefit of these policies that increase demographic diversity is increasing cognitive diversity. So I want to call that as my first official bullshit point. Like that's bullshit number one.
Okay. But how about the question? So the question is, me as a business owner,
Yeah.
why should I care about changing the makeup of society, right? I'm not a government. I am a business. All I care about profit. And what I heard is diversity and inclusion leads to higher financial performances because of cognitive diversity, right?
Yeah.
Because people contribute things, they are from different angles, from their experiences, they are able to predict risk better, etc., etc. Right? So again, why, as a company, should I prioritize other ways of, other aspects of diversity?
Yeah, and I'd say for a number of reasons. So one, it will benefit your bottom line for other reasons that aren't just about cognitive. So it'll benefit your bottom line because of the way that people work because of fairness, because of a lowered rate of turnover, because of increased psychological safety, because of being able to attract the best talent instead of just a narrow range of talent. So if I had to say bottom line, you've been hearing that the only reason to do this demographic diversity work is for the cognitive diversity. So why not just, cut out the middleman, jump straight for the cognitive? What you've been hearing isn't true. Like there's just no other way to put it. It's just not true, Mr. Businessman, if that's what we're imagining. So I'm imagining you, Sasha. You're a woman,
As a
sir.
businessman.
You're I I'm imagining Sasha,
Wow,
business.
microaggressive comment.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I imagined you as someone else making that argument. I didn't think you would ever make the argument. So I had an idea of who I thought would be making the argument in my head. But I can see that this is unhelpful. So yes, I'll imagine you, curiously uninterested in diversity businesswoman person. You've been sold a lie. You've been
Yeah.
sold a lie. The only benefit of diversity is cognitive diversity, and that's just not the case. There are many other benefits. And cognitive diversity is good. Although actually even that kind of question mark, cognitive diversity is good, question mark, but it's not the only good of the demographic
Yeah.
diversity.
So I think, and I don't know if you would agree with me, that there has just been a hyper focus on cognitive diversity.
Yes, so now we're getting into the meat. You're right. There has been a hyper focus. And the question then is why, right? And we don't have the research to say why. But here's an interesting paper that I want to tell you about. And it came out really recently. So it's a 2024 paper, like February 2024. So it's this year, but it's still a while. It's a couple of months away. So there are some researchers who asked the question that you asked, like, why is everyone so interested in cognitive all of a sudden? And in other things like broadening the definition of diversity. Like we don't just want to talk about race and gender. Let's broaden the definition to be more inclusive. Let's include cognitive diversity. And they analyzed a series of law firms from like 2010 to 2019 to see how much they ascribed to this broadening of diversity, and then also to see how diverse they were in terms of race and gender. And what do you think happens? What do you think the firms with the broader definitions, the ones who like to talk about cognitive diversity, do you think that they're more diverse in terms of race and gender, less diverse, the same diverse? What do you think?
Well, I feel like you've set this up.
I have set it up. I'm kind of giving it away.
Yeah. Let me think. Let me say, like, I think they are more diverse.
No,
Okay?
no, not at all. They are less diverse. They are
No.
less diverse. I know, right?
No.
So they talk about let's broaden the definition of diversity. Let's not just do these legally protected categories. Let's do
Mm.
interesting stuff like cognitive. And you can't say that that's why they're doing it, right? That might not be why they're doing it on a conscious or unconscious level. They might not know, but the relationship remains. The people who are really excited to talk about cognitive diversity, for whatever reason, end up being less diverse in other ways. And there's other research that has come out that looks at how women and ethnic minorities interpret that. So when they see diversity statements that talk about cognitive diversity versus just, the regular legally protected diversity, they do interpret that as a sign that says, oh, you don't actually want us here. So whether or not that's a message that companies are trying to send, it's a message that they're sending and that people are getting, that they're getting super hyped about cognitive diversity because they're turning the tap off on the other kinds of diversity. They're less interested in the race, less interested in the gender, and they're telling people, you don't need to bother applying here. We're not that fussed about that kind of diversity. We're doing cognitive now. And again, like I say, no research has said this is deliberate or this is what motivated them, but this is what happens when they say it.
Wow.
And that's the problem.
And another key challenge that I would present to companies who are really promoting and advocating cognitive diversity is the question is, how do they actually measure it? Because from our experience and like the conversations with clients,
Yeah.
what we find is when they say cognitive diversity, they actually mean a variety of things that might not necessarily be as straightforward. So it's usually like one specific metric. So I think the most popular one is personalities. So let's say we do a personality test, and then
Yeah.
we find that we have various different personalities, and that gets the label of cognitive diversity. But that's
Yeah.
not really the same thing.
No, not at all. Those are different kinds of diversities. And in fact, I'd say maybe, maybe I'm more strident. No, not maybe. I'm definitely more like I feel this worse than you do, but it offends me on this because I think you're actually being kinder than I would be, and that many people point to what they mean by cognitive diversity. But I think I've been in the room with you when we've had a conversation with someone who says, well, we're not diverse in those other ways, but we're very cognitively diverse. And then we ask the simple question, how do you measure that? And there is no answer at all, like none.
Yeah.
So it offends me as someone who works in measuring things and quantifying things that you would make a claim to being very cognitive diverse. Like, do you know the work involved in making that claim? You'd have to know exactly
Yeah.
how cognitively diverse you were, exactly how cognitively diverse your competitors were, exactly how cognitively diverse the rest of the population is. You'd have to have a really clear measure for that. And to my experience, literally no one has ever done this. Like no company we've ever interacted with have done this. Do you know someone who's done this?
Well, I don't think, no, we don't know any companies who have done this, but we have done this.
Oh, good. Yeah, sorry. We have nobody else.
Exactly,
When did
except
we do?
for us.
Yes, when did we
No,
do
no,
that?
no. Sign up for Equality Group to measure your cognitive diversity right now.
But it's a
Um,
powerful claim, isn't it? I
it
mean, it
is
says
a
a lot,
powerful claim,
actually.
and it
Yeah.
was a hefty exercise, right? We've done it. Well, but we've done it on our board,
Oh,
who are
good.
quite diverse,
Oh, good.
and we captured over the year. So we've collected sort of all the transcriptions from every single board meeting.
Oh,
And
okay.
then we took, I love how surprised you sound considering that you have done this.
Did I do this? God, my memory
Yes, this
would
is
be
one of
really
those things that it's just one of those projects we have done and it is somewhere in the background of your brain.
sorry, you will eventually discover my memory is super bad. I do projects and then just stop doing them. I occasionally introduce myself to the same person like 5 times.
I
Sasha
know, I
gets
know, I
embarrassed.
know, Keon, because we have been together. But yeah, and yes, this is why sometimes I do feel like you're subtle PA who goes like, by the way, you met this person, so please do remember that. Yeah, we do have a little briefing because you often go like, "Hi, I've never been this. We've delivered to this company for the last 5 years." Like, yeah,
Nice to see
that
you
is
again.
exactly, exactly. But it's great. You know, you have beginner's mindset. That's what I claim.
Thank you. Thank you. But yeah, so we did this. That's cool. I was
We
involved. That's even
we
cooler.
we did. So we took all of the transcripts from every board meeting,
Yes. Yeah.
and
No, I
then
do
we
remember
have
that.
analyzed and have seen which suggestions from which person has
Yes, I do
led
remember that now.
to the most outcomes.
Yeah.
Obviously, because we have people's demographic characteristics,
Yeah.
it also gives us an indication in terms of who does what and who, yeah, like so it was an overlap between demographic characteristics and cognitive characteristics.
Yes. Yes, I do remember that now. And I think what that does, it presents us with something that can be measured and can be criticized so that other companies can say, for example, that they've done the same exercise with their board and they can see what kind of demographic or
Yeah,
cognitive diversity characteristics lead to whatever kind of outcome. Or they can say, well, are all the people with one cognitive diversity characteristic at the top or all the people with another at the bottom? That's actually measuring. And it's not perfect, but it's a start.
yeah.
But most
Because
companies, yeah.
sorry, because what we found through doing this exercise, that the person who spoke the least
Yeah,
in all
yeah,
the meetings
yeah,
had the most impactful suggestions
yeah,
because then we went away, implemented those, and then they led to the highest performative results.
yeah. It was a bit crazy. It was this person would just say 5 lines in the whole
Yeah,
meeting. They would result in 5 action points, and
yeah,
other people would say 50 and get like none.
yeah.
Just which was amazing to look at.
And
Um,
it is amazing, and we would encourage companies to do that. And it is something that obviously we can do for them or they can do themselves. It's just you need to make sure that you have captured that data and then analyze that data properly.
Absolutely. And if you don't have any data, if you don't have any analysis, if you don't have any measurements, you can't make any claims about being cognitively diverse. Like you can't do that. You have to tell me what you're measuring if you're
Yeah.
going to say it. Otherwise, I, like other people, according to the research, will hear the intense interest in cognitive diversity not as a genuine interest in being cognitively diverse, but just as a disinterest in being diverse in the more traditional ways. And that's the danger. That's the danger of saying that you're so interested in something that you've curiously never measured, never tested for, and never compared to any other group of people.
Yeah. So be mindful around promoting cognitive diversity.
Yeah. And I think if I wanted to maybe not be angry all the time and like bring it in to something nicer, I'd say like I'm not angry at cognitive diversity. I actually think it's a good thing. I think it's a great thing. I just think don't pretend it's a replacement for other kinds of diversity. Don't pretend that it's something you can just claim to have without measuring it. And don't use it as something to get rid of the other kinds of diversity or to take the focus off of those other kinds of diversity. It's not good for that. And I think it would be great, actually. I think it'd be lovely to have boards full of extroverts and introverts and full of people who think in really different ways and who come from totally different places. I think that's a great dream. And I think people who support cognitive diversity, they have something good. There's something good there. I just think the bad is when it's used not as a genuine way to build cognitive diversity, but as a way to undermine all the other kinds.
Yeah. So would you suggest then people refer and focus more on other demographic characteristics rather than cognitive diversity? And maybe just to contextualize it, I do think that the reason why people so focus on cognitive diversity is because they want to promote diversity with financial performance, because that has been obviously talked about quite a lot and promoted in various different studies. And obviously, one study, right, the McKinsey study, and the one that they've been running for the last few years, and that has been a bit discredited, saying that it was not peer reviewed, and actually the analysis was not that clear cut. So it kind of undermined quite a lot of their work over the years, saying that diversity links to financial performance.
Sure, and I hear that, but that makes me even more suspicious of the strong cognitive diversity crowd because they're right that the cognitive diversity work, a lot of it hasn't been peer reviewed. And they're right that the research linking cognitive diversity to financial performance isn't that strong. But you know it is like we know it's there. Do you know what has been peer reviewed and is strong? The research linking regular demographic diversity to performance. Like that is there, right? That
What?
exists.
Wait,
Yeah,
what?
that's
There's other
there. Like,
research
yeah, there's
that
other
says
research.
this?
There's like
No,
meta-analyses
stop
on
it.
it. There's multiple meta-analyses linking just regular diversity to financial performance and positive financial performance. So again, like I find it hard to think that, what's up with these people. And I'm gonna say these guys because you know what? It is mostly guys. Like I'm that's a deliberately gendered term. But I'm gonna say that the people who say this, I know, right? I'm pulling it out. I'm going crazy here. Like they can't really tell me that their concern is like a really deep just love for the peer review process when they're ignoring the stuff that is peer reviewed. So like there's all this peer reviewed good data, good meta-analyses sitting there saying regular demographic diversity better for business. And they're like, we're not going to look at any of that. We're going to have this whole cognitive diversity argument and then say, well, the only good thing about demographic is cognitive, and there isn't any proof that cognitive helps. Like, we don't need proof cognitive help. Nobody asked for that. People were asking about does diversity help, and that question has already been answered. You don't need to do it again, is what I would say if I were talking to one
Okay.
of
Okay. So to summarize,
them. Yeah.
um, don't abandon demographic characteristics. So don't over focus on cognitive diversity, because actually that might make things slightly worse. If you
Yeah.
do want to do cognitive diversity, do it transparently and be
Yeah.
clear in terms of what you measure, how you measure, and then promote that. And then also refer to other research that, yeah, talks about diversity and inclusion and financial performance.
Yeah, and I think we could link to some of that as well for people who
Yeah,
are listening, so that people have it, because anyone could get up and say there's a meta-analysis about anything. But I mean, these meta-analyses exist. We can just post them. People can get them, and then they don't need to take our word for all that stuff. They can just read about it themselves, which would be
yeah.
fantastic.
But more so, I think it would be great if companies and people engaged with this topic, not so much from the financial perspective, but from the perspective that it does have an impact on what our society looks like and what our future looks like. And it literally changes stereotypes, perceptions, and assumptions that will have global long-standing impact.
I think that's such a good and such a noble goal. There's a part of me that wonders, like I think there's some companies that would do it because it makes the world a better place. I am cynical enough to think there's probably just more companies that would do it because it made them rich. That's what they're after.
So I believe that those people are such good people,
Okay,
and all they want to do is to promote fairness.
just want to
Yeah,
make the world a better place.
yeah, that's how I see the world.
Good. That's a lovely. Okay, like that must be a great world, to live in that world. I would love to live in that world.
Yes, just narrow your perception of reality. Thank you for listening to Equality Insights. We would love to hear from you. So do get in touch on social media channels or email us directly.
Yes, get in touch. We'd love to hear what you think, and we'd love you to suggest topics that you'd find interesting. See you next week.